In Peru, a survey reveals that 72% of Peruvians approve of President-designate Dina Boluarte's administration. In the United Arab Emirates, Brazilian President Luis Lula Da Silva met with President Mohammed bin Zayed to discuss a bilateral agenda and strategic issues. And in Sudan, heavy clashes are reported between the army and the so-called Rapid Support Forces following negotiations for a way out of the political crisis. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. A recent poll revealed that 72% of Peruvians disapprove of the administration of President-designate Dina Boluarte. According to data published by the research company Datum, in the last 2 months, Boluarte has not shown a noticeable change in approval ratings. According to the latest survey conducted by the company, the President-designate has an approval rating of 18%, 1 percentage point lower than last month, while her disapproval remains at 72%. Meanwhile, her disapproval ratings fell in the center of the country from 85 to 79%, while in the south from 92 to 86%. However, both in Lima and Callao, disapproval of Boluarte rose from 62 to 66%, and in north from 72 to 76%. On Saturday, the Nicaraguan government said they promote bilateral cooperation with China with the signing of projects on thermal energy and housing construction. The Nicaraguan Minister of Transport and Infrastructure, Oscar Mojica, highlighted the advances in the organization process of the housing construction project called Nuevas Victorias. Over 920 houses will be built for social benefit in the first stage. Mojica specified that in total it includes the construction of 12,034 houses in a 3-year period. On the other hand, both sides agreed to increase the installed energy capacity in Nicaragua with 150 megawatts of thermal power plants. The president of the China International Development Cooperation Agency, Luo Shaohui, who visits Nicaragua for the first time, said that other projects in the field of agriculture, education, and infrastructure were also discussed. In China, Brazilian President Luis Da Silva said he is willing to work with Beijing to achieve geopolitical balance in the world. The Brazilian president made the statement as he was wrapping up his 3-day visit to China on Saturday. During his visit, he discussed several commercial and diplomatic agreements, as well as the proposal made by China for peace in Ukraine. Moments before leaving for the United Arab Emirates, where he expects to be signing some agreements concerning industry and agribusiness, Lula Da Silva reiterated his idea of creating a group of countries to negotiate peace between Moscow and Kiev. In this regard, the Brazilian president said that the United States and the European Union should stop fostering war and start talking about peace.
We need the United States to stop encouraging war and start talking about peace. We also need the European Union to start talking about peace, so that we can convince Putin and Zelensky that peace is in everyone's best interest.
Brazilian President Luis Da Silva had a meeting with his counterpart Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan as part of his official visit to the United Arab Emirates. According to information provided by Brazil's Foreign Ministry, at the meeting with Zayed Al Nahyan, the heads of states discussed issues on trade, investment, energy transition, climate change, and global security. They also addressed the role of Brazil and the United Arab Emirates in the United Nations Security Council as non-permanent members. Following the meeting, both leaders are expected to hold a press conference to assess results of the encounter. Lula Da Silva will return to Brazil on Sunday morning, April 16th. Paraguay's Public Health and Social Welfare Ministry reported that at least 90 people have died as a result of a chikungunya epidemic. According to the latest report from the Health Ministry, since the end of 2022, a total of 91 people have died from the disease, 90 of them in 2023. Authorities warn that the victims are mostly people over 60 years of age or children under 1 year old. The document points out that during the last 3 epidemiological weeks, over 10,000 new cases of the disease have been reported, and a total of 198 people have been hospitalized as a result of the sickness. On Friday, the spokesperson of the Argentinian presidency, Gabriela Cerruti, assured that the government is increasing its efforts to contain inflation, which rose to 7.7% in March. That number represents the worst moment of the impact of the war in Ukraine on international prices and the biggest drought in the history of the nation, emphasized Cerruti, who pointed out that her administration is redoubling its efforts, convinced that the way forward is to sustain growth and order. Most of the analysis show that inflation faced the worst moment, but she acknowledged that it started a downward trend that she expects to see reflected in better figures soon. According to the National Institute of Statistics and Censuses, the general level of the Consumer Price Index increased 21.7% in the first quarter of 2023, while the interannual growth was 104.3%. In Colombia, authorities report instability in the Nevado del Ruiz volcano after increasing the cracking of rock inside the volcano in the last hours. The Colombian Geological Service reported that small earthquakes were registered in the last hours in the Arenas crater with 0.3 magnitude. The entity explained that the presence of thermal anomalies at the bottom of the crater and the continuous ash outflow are indicators of a higher level of activity compared to previous weeks. Meanwhile, risk management authorities are working at Celta and Tolima departments in order to insist on evacuation routes for the communities near high-threat zones. Let's take a short break now, but first, remember you can follow us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up, stay with us. On Saturday, French President Emmanuel Macron signed his controversial pension reform into law, prompting accusations from unions and the left. The reform became law after the text was published before dawn in France's official journal, with the opposition claiming that Macron had moved to smuggle it through in the dead of the night. The publication came just hours after the approval on Friday by the Constitutional Council of the essence of the legislation, including the headline change of raising the retirement age from 62 to 64. The standoff with unions and the left has become the biggest challenge of Macron's second mandate, who will now address France on the crisis on Monday evening. In this context, unions are calling for mass Labor Day protests on May 1st, while socialist leader Olivier Faure said that Macron's swift signing of the law showed disdain towards the protest movement.
Not directly, but obviously I will be one of the people who will be impacted. But indeed, given that I'm only 31 today, it's in the distant future and I expect there will be additional reforms by then.
I'm French, but of Ivorian origin. So by the time I may be going back to my country, but even if I don't go back, my children were born here, and I don't want them to work till they're 64, otherwise when would they enjoy retirement? That's too much, so by the time you're supposed to retire, you die?
On Saturday, the Russian Defense Ministry reported that Russian forces successfully advanced on the outskirts of the Ukrainian locality of Bakhmut. Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenkov said that Wagner's assault units successfully advanced, capturing 2 districts on the northern and southern outskirts of the town. During his daily press briefing, Konashenkov added that Ukrainian troops, while retreating, are deliberately destroying city infrastructure and presidential buildings to slow down the advance of Moscow's forces. Military analysts have said that seizing Bakhmut would have public relations and tactical military value for Moscow.
In the Donetsk direction, the most fierce fighting continued in the area of the city of Bakhmut. As a result of operation, the Wagner assault units have successfully advanced, capturing 2 districts on the northern and southern outskirts of the city. The units of the armed force of Ukraine remaining in Bakhmut, while retreating, are deliberately destroying city infrastructure and residential buildings in order to slow the advance of our troops. Detachment of the airborne troops pin down the enemy on the flanks and support the action of the assault detachment to capture the city.
The acting head of the next region, Denis Pushilin, confirmed the first grain shipments from the commercial port of Mariupol city. The senior official informed that Mariupol port is ready to use its full capacity for the import of construction materials and for grain export. According to the official, the first grain shipments will start leaving from this important port on the Sea of Azov in the next 2 weeks. Pushilin added that this will reduce the long lines of ships trading in the region. A report from the International Energy Agency details that despite Western sanctions against Russia's energy sector, the Eurasian country reached its highest level of oil exports in 3 years. According to the IEA, Russian raw oil shipments reached 8.1 million barrels daily, after reporting an increase of some 600,000 barrels a day. The report details that oil byproduct exports reached 3.1 million barrels a day, representing an increase of some 450,000 barrels daily. According to data from Kepler Monitoring Service, quoted by local media, the main buyers of Russian raw oil are Turkey, India, and China. In that sense, the information indicates that New Delhi and Beijing bought close to 90% of the Russian crude oil flow transported by sea during the first quarter of the year. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Saturday resumed his election campaign activities after being evacuated unharmed from an election rally in the west of the country, rocked by an explosion. Kishida was evacuated in Wakayama, where he had gone to deliver a speech in support of a local ruling party candidate. Seconds later, the detonation was heard and the place was filled with white smoke. Witnesses at the scene reported moments of panic. The minister announced that despite the event, he would participate in another public event in Chiba, near Tokyo. Local a 24-year-old man from the Hyogo region was arrested. This explosion also comes less than a year after the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe during an election rally, which shocked the country and led to increased security at these public events. On Saturday, the group of 7 ministers meeting on climate, energy and environment kicked off in Sapporo, Japan. This is the first ministerial-level G7 meeting to be held in the country this year, in which Japan holds the rotating presidency. Economy, Trade and Industry Minister Yasutoshi Nishimura and Environment Minister Akihiro Nishimura were present at the opening ceremony. On this occasion, energy supply stability and decarbonization efforts are on the agenda of the 2-day meeting, with a major focus on whether an agreement can be reached on a timeline for ending coal power generation. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy a Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Sudan, heavy clashes have been reported between the army and the so-called Rapid Support Forces following negotiations for a solution to the current political crisis. According to local media, the confrontations took place in areas surrounding the camp of the RSF. Other similar clashes were reported in the city of Meroe, 200 kilometers to the north, where these paramilitary forces were deployed last Thursday around a military base, ignoring the army's warnings to evacuate the area. The fighting comes just hours after Al-Burhan and parliamentary leader Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo expressed their willingness to negotiate to resolve their differences to join the two forces into a unified army. In Yemen, under the coordination of the International Committee of the Red Cross, the exchange of prisoners between the government and Houthi authorities continued on Saturday as an important step towards peace in the country. The flights on Saturday were part of a large-scale multi-day exchange involving nearly 900 detainees that came amid peace talks that have raised hopes for an end to the Yemen's 8-year-old war between the Houthis and the Yemeni government. On Friday, more than 300 prisoners were transported on 4 flights between Aden and the capital Sana'a, reuniting them with their families before next week's Muslim holiday of Eid al-Fitr. Family members of released prisoners in Yemen received their relatives after years of being apart. The released prisoners and their families expressed their joy at the greeting with their loved ones. All this comes after this Friday, Houthi authorities in Sana'a began the exchange process with the government in the city of Aden. The armed conflict in Yemen started in 2014 after a coup d'etat that triggered a civil war. In 2022, a truce was agreed between the sides after the United Nations organizations and countries of the region made efforts to achieve peace in the country. On Saturday, thousands of flag-waving Israelis rallied in Tel Aviv for the 15th consecutive week to protest against Benjamin Netanyahu's proposal to overhaul the justice system. The mobilizations in Tel Aviv reacted in favor of democracy and also refuses the leadership of the Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and the Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir. The judicial reform has unleashed a wave of discontent in broad sectors of the country, which has shaken the Netanyahu government in spite of the fact that the Prime Minister himself decided to postpone the reform to May in the face of the pressure of the protests that took place in the country. The Arab League condemned the Israeli restriction attacks against Christian pilgrims who traveled to the occupied East Jerusalem for Orthodox Passover celebrations. In a statement, Abu Ali, Assistant Secretary General for Palestinian Affairs and Occupied Arab Territories, denounced Israeli actions that prevent the faithful from accessing and performing their prayers and religious rituals in the Mount Temple. Abu Ali criticized Israel's attempts to change the historical and legal status of the occupied area in Jerusalem as part of its war against the mere existence of the Palestinian people and their rights. The official said that the terrorist attacks against Islamic and Christian holy sites proves the colonial, racist, and fascist nature of the occupying forces. Syrian Foreign Minister Faisal Al-Mekdad arrived in Algeria on an official visit as part of his Arab tour. Upon his arrival at Houari Boumediene International Airport, Minister Al-Mekdad was met by his Algerian counterpart, Ahmed Attaf. The Syrian Foreign Minister is expected to hold talks with Algerian officials aimed at strengthening bilateral relations. They are also expected to review the latest Arab and international developments. This is the first country that Al-Mekdad will visit as part of his tour. He will then travel to Tunisia also to foster bilateral relations, and he will complete his Arab tour with a visit to Iraq. We have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.